I was grabbing coffee with an old colleague recently, someone who spent his whole career climbing and grinding. We were sitting in this renovated warehouse, space floor-to-ceiling windows, soft sunlight, the kind of place designed for a moment of peace. But he was leaning so far forward he was practically falling off his stool. Eyes narrowed as he dissected a 3-word text message he'd received that morning. He was convinced it was a slight, a hidden jab, a sign that things were about to fall apart. He told me, with his grim sort of pride, I have to see the problems before they see me. To him, scanning for disaster was the only way to be wise. What was fascinating was how much work he was putting into being miserable. He wasn't just observing a problem, he was hunting for one. He was so busy searching for the threat that he didn't notice the music, the scent of the coffee, or the fact that the person he was so worried about hadn't even replied yet. He was living in a mental battlefield while sitting in a sanctuary. But then the conversation took a turn. I asked him what he'd do if he finally won, if all the threats were gone. He went silent. The intensity just drained out of him, replaced by this hollow, confused expression. He realized that even if he cleared every obstacle, he wouldn't know how to sit still. He'd just find a new ghost to fight. It made me realize that most of us are addicted to the thorn, the danger, the insult, the injustice, because we've convinced ourselves that vigilance is the same thing as living. We think we're being realistic, but we're actually just blinded by our own defenses. It's a very human trap, one that a 13th century poet dismantled in just 3 short lines that suggest our entire approach to awareness might be completely backwards.
You know, that's such a vivid picture. The guy leaning off his stool, the intensity. I think we all know someone like that. Or maybe we are someone like that sometime.
I think we all are. But that moment of silence you mentioned, when he just went hollow, that's what really stuck with me.
Yeah, because it reveals the whole game, doesn't it? The hunt for the threat, the constant vigilance. It's not actually about solving the external problem. It's the engine. It's what keeps him going. If you take the fight away, he doesn't know who he is.
And that's the perfect entry point for what we're talking about today. I mentioned the 13th century poet. It's Rumi. And the line, at first it sounds almost, I don't know, a little simplistic.
It's something you'd see on a coffee mug.
Right. But when you put it next to this story, and next to the research we're going to dive into, it becomes this incredibly sharp strategic tool. The poem is, why are you busy looking for thorns? Just sit. All flowers are blooming.
Just sit. I mean, to your colleague in that coffee shop, that probably sounds like the worst advice in the world.
It sounds like giving up. It sounds like letting the enemy walk right through the gates.
It sounds like negligence. But what we're going to unpack in this deep dive is that sitting is anything but passive. It's an active, powerful stance. And to get there, we're going to look at this whole dynamic through 3 really distinct lenses.
Okay, so what's the roadmap?
So first, we have to start with the biology, the why. Why are our brains like this? Why does it feel so natural, so responsible even, to hunt for thorns? That's the evolutionary trap, the ghost of the saber-toothed tiger.
You got it, the hardware problem.
Exactly. Then we're going to look at the software, or maybe the social incentives, the economics of misery. Because as you said, your friend thinks he's getting something out of this. There's a payoff to the victim narrative, and we need to understand the high cost of cashing that check.
And then finally, the solution. How do we actually sit?
Right. And for that, we're going to look at this amazing synthesis of ancient philosophy. We're talking Stoicism meets Islamic Sufism. It's a toolkit for building what the Stoics called the inner citadel, a way to finally see the flowers that are blooming right in front of us.
I love that. So we're going from evolutionary psychology to behavioral economics to ancient wisdom. Let's start at the beginning then, the savannah. Because this feeling, this constant low-grade anxiety that the world is a minefield, it feels very modern, but you're saying its roots are ancient.
They're as ancient as we are. It's not a bug, it's a feature, or at least it was a feature. To really get a handle on this, let's build out a character based on the source material. We'll call him Elias.
Okay, Elias, tell me about him.
So Elias is, let's say, a 28-year-old guy living in a big tech city, Austin, maybe. He's smart. He's got a decent job. If you look at his life on paper, he's incredibly safe. He has food delivery, air conditioning, a locked apartment door. By any metric from any other time in human history, he's basically a king.
He's living in a sanctuary, just like my friend the coffee shop.
But if we could plug into Elias's internal world on a typical weeknight, it's not a sanctuary, it's a war zone. He's sitting on his couch, bathed in the blue light of his phone, and he is just doom scrolling.
We've all been there. You go online to check one thing, and 3 hours later, you're an expert on global supply chain collapse.
And it's not just random news. The algorithms have figured him out. They're feeding him a steady diet of everything that confirms his deepest fears. Social injustice, political outrage, economic instability, and specifically threats to his identity as a man.
Okay, so he's deep in that world.
Deep in it. He's reading forums and watching videos about how the dating market is broken, how men are being left behind, how society is stacked against him. He's hunting for digital thorns.
And what's the paradox here? What's he missing while he's on the hunt?
Well, this is the tragic part. Our research notes on a character like Elias show that while he's online documenting and absorbing all this perceived exclusion, he's creating actual exclusion in his own life. He gets a text from a coworker about a happy hour, a real chance for connection, for networking, and he ignores it because he's in the middle of a rage read.
Oh.
And there's more.
He had a nice conversation with a woman at a coffee shop a few days earlier. She actually messages him. But he's so primed by the content he's consuming, which tells him that all interactions are transactional and dangerous, that he just lets the notification sit there. He's too busy reading about why connection is impossible to actually connect.
He's defending a fortress against an imaginary army while his real-life allies are knocking at the gate and he won't let them in.
That is the perfect metaphor. And this isn't a personal failing of Elias's. It's not that he's weak or unintelligent. He's suffering from a condition we have to understand. Evolutionary mismatch. I've heard this term mostly in the context of diet. You know, we crave sugar because it was rare and calorie dense on the savannah, but now it's everywhere and it makes us sick.
That's the classic example, the caloric mismatch. But the social mismatch, which is what Elias is experiencing, is arguably more damaging to our mental health. Our brains, specifically our social emotional circuits, evolved for a very, very different world.
A much smaller world.
Infinitely smaller. For 99% of human history, we lived in small nomadic bands. You knew maybe 50 to 150 people in your entire life.
Right. That's Dunbar's number. The idea that our brain can only really handle about 150 meaningful relationships.
Exactly. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar proposed this, and it holds up surprisingly well. In that ancestral environment, your social standing within that small group was literally a matter of life and death. If you were ostracized, you didn't just get your feelings hurt. You were cut off from food, from protection. You died.
So being hyper-aware of social slights, of shifts in the hierarchy, of what people were thinking about you, that wasn't anxiety. That was a survival skill.
It was the primary survival skill. The person who obsessed over a weird look from the tribe's leader was more likely to correct their behavior and stay in the group. The person who shrugged it off might have been the one left behind when the tribe moved on.
So there's a huge evolutionary advantage to being a little paranoid.
A massive one. Think of it in terms of errors. The cost of a false positive, thinking there's a social threat when there isn't one, is pretty low. You waste some energy, you feel a bit of stress. But the cost of a false negative, missing a real social threat, was catastrophic. It was death.
We are the descendants of the warriors. The chill guys got eaten by leopards.
We are the children of the neurotic. Absolutely. Our brains are fine-tuned threat detection machines. But now, take that finely tuned machine, that hardware designed for 150 people you know intimately, and plug it directly into the internet.
Where you're exposed to the opinions of billions.
It's a system crash. It's what the source material calls social abundance. Just like caloric abundance leads to obesity, social abundance leads to chronic anxiety. Elias's brain isn't just monitoring the subtle cues of his tribe, it's monitoring the explicit judgments of thousands, millions of strangers.
But hold on, does his brain really see a stranger's comment on a forum as the same level of threat as a rival in his tribe? I mean, logically, he knows that Dude Bro 47 doesn't matter.
Logically, on a conscious level, yes, but the amygdala, the brain's ancient alarm system, doesn't really have a "this is just Twitter" filter. When Elias sees a headline that feels like an attack on his group or a comment mocking his values, his body is still getting a jolt of cortisol. His nervous system is reacting as if a tribesman is sharpening a spear and looking at him funny.
And the spear never actually arrives, but the cortisol just keeps dripping. It's a constant low-grade state of alarm.
It's a chronic false alarm.
Yeah.
And when the system is overloaded like that, when it's trying to process a social network that's thousands of times larger than its design specs, it defaults to its most basic programming. Threat detection and social comparison. It can't handle the nuance, so it just sorts everything into us versus them, ally versus enemy.
Which is the perfect environment for these online echo chambers to thrive. It feeds right into that default setting.
It's jet fuel for it. And this brings us to a really specific and often controversial case study mentioned in the research, the online communities known as the manosphere.
Right. Red Pill, MGTOW, those sorts of spaces. Now, It's really easy to just write these guys off, to just label them as hateful and move on. But for this deep dive, we need to understand the mechanism. What is the pull? Why is Elias, our guy in Austin, so drawn to this?
That's the crucial question, and we've got a source here, a study called Misogynists Have Feelings Too, which, despite its provocative title, offers a really nuanced look at this. It describes these online spaces as affective wells.
Affective wells. Affect, meaning emotion. So like a place where emotions gather.
Exactly, a place where deep, unspoken, and often confusing emotions can cool together. A lot of the men in these spaces are feeling a genuine sense of displacement, and we have to acknowledge that. The world has changed. The economic promises made to their fathers and grandfathers don't necessarily apply anymore. Gender roles have been completely reshaped in a generation. That creates a real emotional dissonance, a feeling of, where do I fit in all of this?
And that's a valid feeling. To feel lost or confused in a rapidly changing world is a legitimate human experience.
The feeling is absolutely legitimate. The trap is in how that feeling gets processed. The affective well provides a very simple, very compelling explanation for a very complex feeling. Instead of sitting with the ambiguity and the difficulty of a changing world, it offers a single thorn to pin all the pain on.
It provides a target.
It provides a target. In this case, the object that comes to signify all that pain, all that rejection, all that confusion is women. Or rather, a specific, simplified caricature of women.
So it's a cognitive shortcut, a heuristic.
A misogynistic heuristic, as the research calls it. It's so much easier for the brain to process the idea that women are hardwired for hypergamy and manipulation than it is to grapple with, say, the deindustrialization of the Western economy and the rise of the service sector have fundamentally altered traditional markers of masculine identity, and I personally feel adrift.
One is a clear enemy you can fight. The other is like trying to punch fog.
You can't punch fog. And the ultimate irony here, which the source material really zeroes in on, is the language these communities use. They see themselves as having taken the red pill. They believe they are the ones who are awake to reality.
They use all this pseudoscientific jargon, sexual market value, alpha, beta. It sounds like economic analysis.
It mimics the detached language of science and economics, but the engine driving the whole thing is pure, unadulterated emotional pain. They are desperately hunting for a thorn because finding the thorn makes their suffering feel logical and predictable. It gives them a sense of control.
So to bring it back to Elias, in his mind, he's becoming an enlightened realist. He's seeing the truth. But from a biological perspective, he's just a victim of evolutionary mismatch. He's scratching that ancient itch for threat detection until it's raw.
He's scratching it until it bleeds. And in doing so, he's building a prison. If he truly believes that all women are manipulative or that all relationships are a power struggle, then he doesn't have to risk the vulnerability of actually messaging that woman from the coffee shop. He's safe from potential rejection.
But he's also completely locked out of the possibility of connection. It's a profound tragedy of mismatch. He's using a Stone Age brain to navigate a digital world, and the result is this self-imposed isolation.
And that isolation has a cost. It's not just an emotional cost, it's a tangible one. It costs him time, energy, focus, which is a perfect bridge to our second section. We've talked about the biology, but now we need to talk about the economics.
The economics of misery. Right. This isn't just about Elias. Let's introduce our second character, Marcus. Now, Marcus isn't necessarily in the manosphere. He's more of a type you might find in any office. He's the underdog.
The guy who always got a raw deal. We all know him, Marcus.
Exactly. Marcus has constructed his entire professional identity around the idea that he has been wronged by the system. Maybe he was passed over for a promotion he felt he deserved. Maybe his boss takes credit for his ideas. The specific grievance almost doesn't matter.
The grievance is the fuel.
It's the fuel. And I was looking at a breakdown in our notes of how a guy like Marcus spends his day. Let's say he spends 4 hours just ruminating, replaying the injustice in his head, collecting evidence, and he spends another 2 hours complaining to his colleagues, to his partner, trying to get them on his side. That's 6 hours a day.
6 hours of prime cognitive real estate, just gone.
It's worse than gone. He's actively using that energy to build the walls of his own prison, to reinforce the narrative that he's powerless. So here's the question. If it's such a terrible investment of his time and energy, why is it so damn addictive? What's the payoff for clinging to that victim narrative?
Because in the short term, and from a certain strategic point of view, it's not a terrible investment at all. In fact, it can be a highly effective strategy for acquiring resources.
You're saying that playing the victim is a strategy.
A deeply embedded and often very successful one. We have a fascinating study here on what's called signaling virtuous victimhood. It completely flips the script on how we should view this behavior.
Okay, break that down for me. Virtuous victimhood.
So think about the values of modern Western societies. We prize equality. We have a strong moral impulse to protect the vulnerable and punish oppressors.
Sure, that seems like a good thing.
It is a very good thing. But like any powerful social value, it creates a marketplace of incentives. If you can successfully signal to the group that you are a victim, you can gain access to resources without having to reciprocate. You get sympathy, which is a resource. You get attention, which is a resource. You might even get tangible benefits like money or special treatment.
And you also get a kind of moral high ground.
You get what the researchers call moral immunity. It's an incredibly powerful social shield. If you are the designated victim in a situation, your claims are often taken at face value. You have what they term psychological standing, the right to make demands. And crucially, anyone who criticizes you or questions your narrative risks being labeled as an oppressor.
So Marcus, maybe not even consciously, has figured out that by constantly talking about the thorn, about how he was wrong, he shields himself from criticism and gains social status.
He's trading long-term growth for short-term status and safety. The study identifies the most powerful version of the signal as the virtuous victim. It's a 1-2 punch. Signal 1 is I am suffering, the victim. Signal 2 is I am a good person, the virtue. When you combine those, you become a nearly unassailable figure. I am a good person who is being unjustly persecuted. How can anyone argue with that?
It's a very powerful position to be in. But you said there's a dark side.
There's a very dark side, and this is where the research gets pretty confronting. The study found a significant correlation between people who frequently engage in this kind of virtuous victim signaling and the personality traits known as the dark triad.
Okay, the dark triad. That's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and the psychopathy. That's a heavy accusation. Are we saying Marcus is a psychopath because he complains about his boss?
No, and we have to be extremely careful and precise here. This is critical. The research is not saying that people who experience genuine victimization are psychopaths. Real trauma is real. What we are talking about is the strategic performance of victimhood as a primary mode of social interaction.
So it's about the people who make it their identity, their main tool for navigating the world.
Exactly. It's the signaling behavior. And the study found that individuals who scored high on the virtuous victimhood scale were also more likely to display Machiavellian traits, a willingness to manipulate others for personal gain. For instance, they were more likely to lie or cheat in an experiment to win a small amount of money.
That feels so counterintuitive. You'd think the person who is most vocal about injustice would be the most ethical.
And that is the genius of the strategy. The signal projects morality, but the underlying drive for a Machiavellian personality is pure utility. Victimhood becomes the most efficient tool in their toolbox to control others and extract resources without having to give anything back.
It's a non-reciprocal resource extraction strategy. That's a very clinical way of saying they're takers, not givers.
It's what it is. Yeah. Marcus is demanding his colleagues' time, his partner's emotional energy, the company's leniency. He's constantly making withdrawals from the social bank account. But what is he depositing? Grievance.
And the tragedy for Marcus himself, assuming he's not a full-blown narcissist, but just a guy caught in this loop, is that he probably believes his own press. He thinks he's fighting for justice.
He thinks he's a freedom fighter. But he's actually just burning his own future to keep himself warm in the present. This is the opportunity cost we talked about. All that energy he pours into ruminating on the thorn on the boss, the promotion, the insult is energy he's not using to update his resume, learn a new skill, find a mentor, or just go for a walk and clear his head.
There's a concept in the source material about this, right? The sticky object.
I love that concept. It's so descriptive. When you allow your emotions and your attention to stick to an external person or event, the boss who wronged you, the ex who betrayed you, you are outsourcing your agency. You are giving that thorn control over your inner state. You are literally transferring your most valuable resources, your time and attention, to the very thing you claim to hate.
So when Marcus spends 6 hours of his day thinking about his terrible boss, he's essentially giving his boss 6 more hours of his labor for free.
He's working for the ghost of his boss inside his own head. And in the notes, there's a contrast to a colleague of his. This colleague also gets passed over for the promotion. He feels the sting. He's disappointed.
But what does he do differently?
He practices what the sources call emotional restraint, which is not the same as suppression. He doesn't pretend he's not upset, but he treats the event as a data point, not an identity. He asks, okay, this happened. Why? What feedback can I get? Is there a skill I need to build? Or is this a sign that this isn't the right place for me? He detaches the emotion from the event and focuses on utility. He doesn't let his attention get stuck.
That is so much harder to do than just complaining. The gravitational pull of the grievance is immense.
It's immense because, again, it feels like you're doing something. It feels like vigilance. But what we're trying to establish here is that both of these mindsets, Elias, the threat hunter, and Marcus, the victim signaler, are ultimately traps. They're bankrupt strategies.
Okay, so we've got the diagnosis. We are biologically wired to find the foreign, and we are socially incentivized to display it. That's a pretty potent cocktail. So how the hell do we get out?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. This is where we have to move from diagnosis to prescription, and that brings us to our third and final character. Let's call him Julian.
Julian. Now, his context is different, right? He's not just dealing with a mean text or a mispromotion. The notes say he's living through a period of genuine social and economic instability.
Exactly. Think of Julian as living somewhere where the thorns aren't just perceptions, they are very, very real. The currency might be collapsing. Political stability is gone. The rules of society are changing day by day. He has every objective reason to be an Elias or a Marcus, to be completely consumed by threat and grievance.
But he's not.
He's not. He's developed a practice, a mindset that he calls the sovereign seat.
The sovereign seat. I like the sound of that. What does it entail?
He describes it as a fusion of two ancient traditions, Sufi stillness and Stoic survivalism. In the face of all this external chaos, all these screaming headlines and panicking people, he made a conscious choice to stop evaluating. He stopped giving his assent, as the Stoics would say, to the idea that these events were definitively bad. He focused on maintaining his psychological sovereignty.
Psychological sovereignty. Meaning the one thing they can't take from you is how you choose to respond.
That's the core of it. He realized that in a world where he couldn't control his finances, his government, or his future, the only territory he truly owned was his own mind. And sitting down, as he put it, was his act of rebellion. He found the flower because he stopped trying to fight the entire forest fire.
This is where we get into the solution then. And it's fascinating that he landed on this blend of Stoicism and Sufism. On the surface, they seem very different. I think of Stoicism as being Roman, disciplined, a bit grim, and Sufism as Persian, poetic, mystical.
They have very different flavors, but the source material here draws out a historical and philosophical bridge between them that is it's incredible. Most people have no idea how deeply Islamic philosophy engaged with Greek thought.
I certainly didn't. So what's the connection?
During the Islamic Golden Age, around the 9th century, scholars in Baghdad were voraciously translating the Greek classics. Thinkers like Al-Kindi and Al-Razi, they weren't just reading Plato and Aristotle, they were reading Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius. And they didn't see Stoicism as some alien pagan philosophy. They saw it as a practical toolkit for living out a core Islamic principle.
And that principle is?
Tawakku. It's a rich term, but it roughly translates to a profound trust or reliance on the divine decree.
Okay, trust in the decree. How does Stoicism help with that?
Well, let's look at the absolute cornerstone of Stoic practice, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus drills this home constantly. There are things that are up to us, and there are things that are not up to us.
Right. What's up to us is our judgments, our intentions, our responses. What's not up to us is basically everything else, our health, our reputation, what other people do, the economy.
Exactly. Now, these Islamic thinkers looked at that and saw a perfect reflection of their own theology. They mapped the Stoic dichotomy onto the concepts of ikhtiyar, which is your personal sphere of moral choice, and qadar, which is divine decree or destiny.
So all the chaos Julian is facing, the crashing economy, the political turmoil, that's all qadar. That's destiny.
That is qadar. It's God's department, not his. His attempt to control it is not only futile, it's a kind of arrogance. The only thing that falls under his jurisdiction, his ikhtiyar, is his response, his choice, his judgment.
Just the act of reframing it that way, not my department, feels like it would lift an immense weight off your shoulders.
It's the beginning of all freedom, but to do it effectively, you need a very specific skill. The Stoics called it the discipline of assent. The Islamic philosophers had a similar concept, tasdik, which means affirmation or verification.
The discipline of assent. Unpack that. What does it mean in a practical moment?
Let's go all the way back to your friend in the coffee shop. He gets the 3-word text. See you then. His brain, his amygdala, immediately serves up an impression, a flash, a feeling. This is a slight. This is a threat. That first flash is involuntary. You cannot stop it.
So the goal isn't to not feel the initial fear or anger.
No, that's a fool's errand. You'll just end up beating yourself up for having normal human emotions. The feeling is just data from your ancient hardware. The discipline of assent is about what you do in the microsecond after that flash. Do you give your assent? Do you agree with that initial impression? Do you sign off on it and say, yes, this is reality?
My friend absolutely signed off on it. He didn't just sign it, he notarized it and built a whole legal case around it.
He built a federal case. Julian, practicing this from his sovereign seat, would feel that same initial flash of fear when he sees a bad economic report. But he would consciously withhold his assent. He would say, I notice a feeling of fear arising. I notice the thought that this is a catastrophe. But I do not consent to this judgment. I will not affirm it as the ultimate truth. He keeps the gates of his inner citadel closed.
It's like having a bouncer at the door of your mind. The initial impression can show up, but it doesn't automatically get into the club.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this connects directly to what Al-Kindi wrote in his treatise on dispelling sorrows. He argued that our sorrow doesn't come from the external event itself, losing a job, being insulted. It comes from our erroneous judgment about the event. We are sad because we have a hidden belief that our job should be permanent or that people should always be nice. When you correct the judgment, the sorrow loses its fuel.
So when Rumi says, just sit, he doesn't mean just veg out on the couch. He means sit in that sovereign seat of judgment and be the bouncer. Be disciplined about what you let in.
It is the most active form of sitting you can imagine. Why are you busy looking for thorns? Just sit. Stop the frantic outward search for threats. Stop the hunt. Bring your attention back to this one place you actually control, the seat of judgment.
Okay. But then there's the final and maybe most difficult part of the poem. All flowers are blooming. For Elias, who feels alone. For Marcus, who feels cheated. For Julian, whose world is literally falling apart. Where on earth are the flowers? That can sound like a cruel joke.
It can. And this is where the perspective shifts from the Stoic defense to the Sufi embrace. The key is the verb tense Rumi uses. He doesn't say all flowers will bloom. He says they are blooming, present continuous, right now.
We're always thinking the flowers are in the future. I'll be happy when I get the promotion. I'll finally relax when I'm in a relationship. Things will be okay when the political situation stabilizes.
We are constantly holding our own well-being hostage to a future condition that may never arrive. We sacrifice the reality of the present moment for a fantasy of the future. The perspective of the sovereign seat is that the flower isn't a future reward. The flower is woven into the fabric of this moment, regardless of its content.
Even if the content is painful.
Especially if the content is painful. This connects to that famous Nietzschean idea of amor fati, to love one's fate. In the Islamic tradition, it's called rida bil qada, which means contentment with the decree.
Contentment. That's another one of those words that can sound really passive, like resignation. I guess I'll just be content with my life being terrible.
It's the opposite of resignation. It's not settling. It's a radical form of engagement. It's the ability to look at the totality of your current reality, the good, the bad, the terrifying, the thorn, and say, this is what is, and this is my curriculum. This is what I have been given to work with. It's the realization that the difficulty is the very thing that allows you to cultivate virtue. The thorn is what allows you to practice courage. The insult is what allows you to practice forgiveness. The uncertainty is what allows you to practice faith.
So if you're so busy hating the thorn, you're missing the opportunity it's presenting you.
You miss the opportunity, and you miss the beauty that coexists with it. Let's go back to your friend one last time. He was in a beautiful sunlit space. He was drinking good coffee. He was with a friend who cared enough to listen to him. Those are flowers. Real, tangible moments of grace. But he couldn't see them. He couldn't feel them. He was crushing them under the heel of his boot while he scanned the horizon for a predator that didn't exist.
That image, crushing the flower under your own foot. It's powerful. It feels like the whole journey we've been on is about shifting from being a security guard constantly scanning the perimeter to being a gardener.
I love that. A gardener doesn't deny the existence of thorns or weeds. He's a realist. But he doesn't spend all day staring at them and complaining about them. He puts his attention, his energy, his care into cultivating what he wants to grow.
And he understands that he's part of the ecosystem. He's not just at war with it.
And that fundamental shift in posture from warrior to gardener might be the single most important psychological adjustment we can make to thrive in the modern world. We are, as a culture, profoundly oversecured and undernourished.
Oversecured and undernourished. That's the diagnosis for so many of us. So let's try to synthesize all of this. We have covered a huge amount of territory, from evolutionary biology to the Dark Triad to 9th century Baghdad. For someone listening right now who is having that uncomfortable recognition of, oh my God, I'm Elias, or wow, I do that Marcus thing, what's the takeaway?
The takeaway is a threefold awareness. First, become aware of the biological trap. Recognize that you have Elias's brain. Your amygdala is a terrible guide to the modern world. It will lie to you about the severity of social threats. So when you feel that anxiety spike while reading a comment online, just name it. There's the mismatch. My Stone Age brain is overreacting.
Don't automatically believe the feeling. Just observe it.
Just observe it. Don't assent to it. Second, become aware of the economic trap. Ask yourself Marcus's question, but honestly, what am I actually buying with this grievance? What's the payoff for this story of being wronged? Is it sympathy? Is it a way to avoid taking responsibility? Get clear on the transaction you're making.
And if you realize you're paying $1 for 5 cents worth of comfort, it's time to close the account.
It's time to divest. And finally, and most importantly, start to practice the sovereign solution. Begin to build your Julian seat. Every day, practice distinguishing between what's in your control and what isn't, between qadar and ikhtiar. And when that powerful addictive urge arises, the urge to hunt for the thorn, to dissect the email, to prove your case, just for a moment, stop, just sit.
It sounds so simple, just sit. But it's really the hardest work there is.
It is simple, but it is not easy. It's a practice. It's a muscle you strengthen every time you choose to pull your attention away from the imaginary thorn and place it on the real flower.
It all comes down to attention, doesn't it? We started this whole conversation with a 3-word text message, and we've seen how it can be the trigger for a whole worldview of threat. But it's just raw data until our attention, our judgment, turns it into a thorn.
Attention is the currency of life. It's the only thing you truly have to spend. Where you invest it determines the entire texture of your reality.
Well, I want to leave everyone listening with a final thought on that, the kind of provocation for the week ahead. We've used these characters, Elias, Marcus, Julian, as archetypes. But the truth is, we are all of them. I have my Elias days, my Marcus moments, and I aspire to have more Julian moments. So the challenge is this. The next time you feel that pull, that familiar, urgent need to zoom in on a problem, to replay an insult, to catalog all the ways you've been wrong, just pause and ask yourself, are you hunting for a predator that doesn't exist? And more importantly, by staring so hard at that thorn, what flower right here, right now, are you crushing under your own foot?